To Daniel Hale, the inheritance was supposed to be a joke, a crumbling steel shelter buried beneath the pines outside Spokane, left behind by a grandfather he barely remembered. He'd pictured a cold, rust-eaten bunker smelling of mold and regret. But the moment he stepped through its doorway, he realized he wasn't alone. Two golden eyes gleamed from the shadows, unblinking and alive. A bobcat. And when Daniel tried to chase it off, the animal did something he never expected. It led him toward a secret men had killed to protect for more than a century. Early autumn wrapped Spokane in a quiet kind of melancholy. Low clouds clung to the hills, and last night's rain still glistened on the cracked sidewalks. The streets smelled faintly of wet asphalt and cedar smoke. Inside a small rental on the north edge of town, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, staring at a single envelope as if it could rewrite his entire life. He was 49, tall but stooped, his once square shoulders softened by grief. His dark hair was cropped close in the way old soldiers kept it, streaked now with gray. His face bore the weather of years outdoors, and the hollowness of someone who'd lost too much. The walls around him were bare except for a faded photo of his late wife, Caroline. She had died 2 years ago, and with her had gone the rhythm of his days. Medical bills had swallowed the savings they'd spent decades building. The house felt emptier every week, the silence pressing on him like another debt. The furnace clicked, a tired sound. Outside, wind rattled the window frame. Daniel unfolded the letter again, though he'd already memorized every word. It came from a law office in West Virginia, his family's birthplace, a place he hadn't seen since childhood. His grandfather, Raymond Hale, had passed away. Daniel was listed as sole heir. The estate, however, consisted of exactly one asset, a decommissioned World War II bunker built into a hillside. No money. No land. Just a steel tomb in the woods. He had laughed the first time he read it, a short, humorless sound that echoed off the empty walls. What was he supposed to do with a relic like that? Sell it for scrap? Still, a stubborn voice inside him, the one that had kept him alive through war and widowhood alike, whispered, "Go see it." Maybe it was duty. Maybe it was boredom. Or maybe he just needed a reason, any reason, to leave that suffocating house behind. So on a gray morning with mist sliding between the ridges, Daniel packed a duffel, climbed into his old pickup, and drove north toward the forest. The farther he went, the narrower the road became, just 2 ruts through wet pine needles. Branches scraped the truck's sides. Mud spattered the wheel wells. The smell of rain and earth thickened as the path wound uphill. At last he saw it. A slab of concrete and rusted steel jutted from the hillside, half swallowed by moss. A massive blast door leaned inward like a weary soldier. Beside it, a sagging shack crouched under the trees, its tin roof dented and green with mildew. "So this is it," he muttered. "My legacy." The air was damp and sharp with pine. The forest was unnervingly still, no birdsong, no wind through the needles, just his breathing and the soft crackle of dripping leaves. He pulled his jacket tighter and approached the shack first. The door resisted, then groaned open on swollen hinges. Inside was a single dusty room filled with junk, crates collapsing under their own weight, tools coated in rust, spiderwebs hanging from the rafters like gray lace. Dust motes drifted in the weak light seeping through holes in the roof. Daniel set down his bag and started clearing space, more out of habit than purpose. The motions were automatic, sweep, stack, sort, the kind of order a soldier imposes on chaos. Sweat dampened his brow even in the chill air. Then he froze. A low rumble rolled from the far corner. Not quite a growl, but close. He turned slowly. 2 golden eyes burned in the dimness. The animal stepped forward, soundless. A bobcat, lean, scarred, its tawny coat dulled with age yet its movements precise, lethal in their grace. It stopped several feet away, muscles coiled but motionless, studying him. Daniel's instincts tensed. He could grab the shovel by the door, shout, make himself big. But something in the animal's calm held him still. It didn't look afraid. It looked expectant. Easy, he murmured. I don't want trouble. The bobcat's ears flicked. It tilted its head, then sat down, tail curling neatly around its paws. The unbroken stare unsettled him, not threatening, just measured. Minutes stretched. This place isn't worth fighting over, he muttered finally. Not for me. Not for you either. The animal didn't move. When he carried some broken boards outside to burn, he could feel it watching from the doorway. Always still. Always silent. By the time he returned, the bobcat had relocated to the opposite corner, eyes following him with quiet intelligence. Shade, he said aloud. You look like a shadow. Might as well have a name. The name stuck instantly. He sank into a chair, exhaustion seeping into his bones. Beyond the shack, the bunker crouched against the hillside, its door streaked with rust. Why had his grandfather kept such a place? Survivalism? Paranoia? Or something else entirely? Shade blinked slowly, unblinking yet somehow aware, as if she carried a message he wasn't ready to hear. Outside, wind sighed through the pines. Twilight bled across the sky, bruised purple fading toward black. Smoke curled from the small fire he'd lit. Daniel should have driven home, yet something in him refused to leave. The bunker. The cat. The inheritance he'd mocked. They all pressed on him with a weight he couldn't define. For the first time in years, curiosity stirred beneath the grief. Maybe this hole in the ground wasn't empty after all. Night came fast in those woods. By the time Daniel lit his lantern, the forest had vanished into shadow. He stood before the bunker's door, fingers tracing the cold metal. The hinges screamed when he pulled. A breath of stale air rolled out, rust, dust, and something older. Shade slipped past his boots, silent as smoke. He switched on a flashlight. The beam sliced through the dark, revealing walls of bare concrete and rusted shelves. Dust hung thick, disturbed only by Shade's tail. At the far end sat an old desk, half buried under stacks of notebooks and rolled maps. Daniel crossed the room, brushing away cobwebs. Dozens of journals lay there, each bound in worn leather and labeled in his grandfather's cramped handwriting. He flipped one open, pages filled with sketches, numbers, cryptic calculations. Water tables, soil pressure, structural load. Scribbled words repeated again and again, Ashford. Burden. None of it made sense. He laughed under his breath, a dry, bitter sound. You really lost it down here, didn't you, old man? Shade prowled the perimeter, tail twitching, eyes catching the light like molten coins. After an hour of fruitless reading, frustration boiled up. He slammed one of the journals shut, sending a puff of dust into the air. Useless. He gathered a few loose papers to burn for warmth, but before he reached the fireplace, Shade hissed, low, sharp, commanding. She was pawing furiously at the bricks near the hearth. What is it, girl? He knelt, shining the flashlight where she scratched. At first the wall looked ordinary, old bricks darkened by soot, but when he pressed his palm against one, it shifted slightly. His heartbeat quickened. He dug his fingers in and pried. The brick slid free, revealing a hollow pocket behind it. Inside, his hand brushed cold metal, a small tin box, dusty but intact. Shade jumped onto the table as he set it down. Her gaze never left it. Daniel opened the lid carefully. Inside lay a brass compass, its glass face fogged with age, and beneath it, a folded sheet of yellowed paper covered in tiny numbers and letters, a cipher. Across the top, written in fading ink, were 3 words, Ashford cipher, page 1. Daniel stared, pulse hammering. His grandfather hadn't been mad. He'd been hiding something. Shade rubbed against his arm, purring softly, the first sound of comfort in that desolate room. For the first time in years, Daniel Hale felt alive. Morning in Spokane broke pale and cold. Mist drifted through the pines like ghostly breath. Daniel hadn't slept, only dozed in snatches on the cot pushed against the bunker wall. The brass compass and the cipher sheet lay on the desk beside him, glinting in the weak light that seeped through the cracks in the steel door. Shade prowled near the entrance, every sound outside drawing her ear. Once, she froze, head lifted, muscles taut. Daniel held his breath. Faintly, from the trees, came the crunch of something moving, measured, deliberate. Then silence. He kept his pistol close after that. When dawn finally filtered through the canopy, he folded the cipher into his jacket pocket and climbed out of the bunker. Cold air hit his lungs like a warning. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just a relic. It was a secret that had survived generations, and secrets like that never stayed buried without a reason. He needed help. There was only one person he trusted to make sense of the madness his grandfather had left behind. Dr. Eleanor Price. She'd been a friend of Raymond Hale for decades, a historian who had spent her life chasing obscure footnotes through archives and battlefields. If anyone could read a century-old cipher, it was her. Eleanor's home sat on the edge of town, an aging Victorian wrapped in ivy and memory. Books spilled from every shelf, maps papered the walls in uneven layers. The smell of tea and dust filled the air. Eleanor herself was in her 70s, slight and sharp-eyed, with white hair coiled into a bun that never stayed neat for long. Her voice carried that clipped precision of someone who had taught classrooms full of distracted minds. She studied the compass and the folded paper beneath a brass reading lamp while Daniel sat opposite her, hands wrapped around a mug he hadn't touched. Shade lingered near the door, eyes glowing like embers in the low light. Eleanor didn't flinch at the sight of the bobcat. She simply lifted an eyebrow. "Your grandfather always did have a flair for strange company," she said. "Looks like you've inherited it." Daniel managed a tired smile. "Guess so." For several minutes, only the rustle of paper filled the room as Eleanor traced her finger across the cipher's lines. Finally, she leaned back. "These aren't random numbers," she murmured. "They're coordinates, or close to it. And this name, Ashford, rings a bell." She rose, moving to a shelf stacked with battered military texts. Pages fluttered as she searched. "Here," she said at last, tapping a worn spine. "Colonel Thomas Ashford. Union Army. Civil War. Brilliant strategist, and a man who vanished with an entire payroll shipment of gold in 1865. Daniel frowned. "You're saying my grandfather was hunting Civil War treasure?" Eleanor's gaze sharpened. "Not treasure, evidence. Ashford was rumored to have uncovered corruption in the Union command. He hid proof of it, ledgers, testimonies, the stolen payroll itself, inside a series of coded vaults. Some believe he died protecting it." Daniel felt a chill trace his spine. "My grandfather thought that vault was here. In this bunker." She nodded slowly. "If he left you that compass and cipher, he must have found part of Ashford's trail." Then her tone hardened. "But if he found it, others might have too. Raymond mentioned men asking questions years ago, corporate types with old money and longer memories." Daniel remembered the sound in the forest last night, the deliberate footsteps in the dark. "What kind of men?" he asked. "The kind who don't mind getting their hands dirty when there's something worth taking." She folded the paper carefully. "Whatever's in that bunker, Daniel, it's valuable enough that someone hid it for more than a century. Be careful who learns you're looking." The sky was already fading to copper when he left Eleanor's house. Shade padded beside him, silent as shadow. He drove toward the hills, headlights carving through the mist, but as the forest road narrowed, another pair of lights appeared in his rearview mirror. A sleek black SUV. It followed him for miles, always keeping the same distance. When Daniel finally turned into the clearing near the bunker, the SUV pulled in behind him. He stepped out, hand near his jacket. The driver's door opened, and a tall man in his 50s climbed out. His coat was spotless despite the mud. Gray streaked his hair in careful symmetry, his smile was the kind that cost money to practice. "Mr. Hale," he called, voice smooth as oil. "Leland Vance. I represent Apex Resource Management. Daniel said nothing. Shade emerged from behind the truck, fur bristling, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Vance's eyes flicked toward her with faint amusement before returning to Daniel. I understand this property recently passed to you. My company specializes in recovering and preserving historical sites. I'd like to make you an offer, one that would, I believe, solve your current financial situation. He named a figure. It was high, temptingly high. Enough to clear every debt Daniel carried. But his tone wasn't friendly, it was possessive. I'm not interested, Daniel said flatly. Vance's smile thinned. I'd reconsider. These bunkers are unstable, dangerous, even. Accidents happen. Shade stepped forward, a rumbling snarl rising from her throat. The air between them turned knife-edge still. Daniel didn't move. You've made your offer, he said quietly. Now leave. For a moment, Vance studied him, eyes calculating. Then he placed a business card on the hood of the truck. My offer stands, until it doesn't. He turned, climbed back into the SUV, and disappeared down the muddy road, leaving only tire tracks and the smell of diesel. Daniel stood there long after the sound of the engine faded. When he finally looked down, the card still sat on the hood, the embossed logo catching the weak light. He picked it up, read the company's name again, and let it fall into the mud. Shade brushed against his leg, tail flicking like punctuation. Inside the shack, Daniel lit a lantern and set the compass on the desk. Its glass reflected the flicker of the flame, the needle trembling as though alive. Eleanor's warning echoed in his head, men with long memories. Vance hadn't come to buy a bunker. He'd come to claim something he believed already belonged to him. The realization settled cold in Daniel's gut. His grandfather hadn't left him a fortune. He'd left him a fight. By dawn, the forest was heavy with fog. The air smelled of rain and old metal. Daniel stood outside the bunker, staring at the dark entrance. Shade waited at his side, patient, alert. He couldn't face what was coming alone. There was only one person who might stand with him, someone who had shared foxholes and firefights long before civilian life dulled their instincts. Rico Alvarez. They'd served together in the Rangers, Daniel the steady tactician, Rico the demolitions genius who laughed in the face of chaos. When Rico's beat-up rental car appeared on the trail that afternoon, Daniel felt the first real relief he'd known in months. Rico stepped out, lean and restless, a grin spreading across his face. Hell, Hale, you look like death warmed over. What mess did you drag me into this time? Shade padded forward, sniffed him once, and, after a tense pause, rubbed against his leg. Rico chuckled. Figures. You'd pick a wildcat for a sidekick. Inside the shack, Daniel spread out the journals, the cipher, and the compass. Rico studied them with a frown, tracing diagrams and notes. This isn't paranoia, he said at last. This is engineering. Hydraulics, pressure gates, counterflood systems. Your grandfather wasn't building a bunker, he was designing a fortress. Daniel stared at the map of his inheritance, realizing for the first time that the old man's madness had been method. Outside, the wind shifted. From far down the valley came the faint growl of an engine. Shade's ears pricked. The war for the truth, Daniel realized, had already begun. Rain came hard the next night, drumming on the tin roof above the shack. Daniel and Rico stood at the bunker's mouth, flashlights cutting through the storm. The steel door loomed like a gate to another world. Shade waited between them, tail twitching, her golden eyes alive with purpose. Rico adjusted the straps on his pack. You sure about this? Daniel nodded. My grandfather built it. He left the key. We finish what he started. He pulled the brass key from his pocket. Its weight felt heavier than it should, like it carried the gravity of every generation that had died protecting its secret. The lock turned with a deep metallic click. They pushed together. The door groaned open, the sound swallowed by the rain. Cold air spilled out, heavy with rust and time. Shade slipped ahead, silent as vapor. Inside, the passage stretched into darkness, the beam of Daniel's flashlight sliding across concrete slick with condensation. Every sound, each drop of water, each scrape of a boot, echoed back at them. Symbols marked the walls in faded chalk, arrows, coordinates, equations, his grandfather's handwriting. Rico scanned them, brow furrowed. He mapped this like a battlefield. Daniel's voice was low. He was preparing for one. The deeper they went, the thicker the air became. The corridor sloped downward, narrowing into a tunnel barely wide enough to walk shoulder to shoulder. Puddles glimmered where the roof leaked. Somewhere deep below, water dripped steadily, a hollow, patient rhythm. Shade froze first. She crouched low, ears forward, muscles tense. Daniel followed her gaze to the floor ahead, a patch of slick mud that shimmered oddly under the flashlight. He took a step forward, but Shade hissed, baring her teeth. Rico crouched, sweeping the light closer. Hold up. He picked up a loose pebble and tossed it. The instant it hit the mud, the ground caved in, thin crust collapsing to reveal jagged metal below. A pressure plate trap. Daniel's pulse kicked hard. Shade patted back, brushing against his leg. Her warning had saved them both. Guess she's our radar now, Rico muttered, straightening. They moved slower after that, Shade leading. The air grew colder, the tunnels branching like veins. Every turn felt like walking deeper into someone else's mind. Finally, the passage opened into a vast chamber carved straight from the mountain. Their lights swept across rusted beams and stone walls lined with metal cases. In the center stood a massive circular door, half buried in rock, its surface stamped with the insignia of the Army Corps of Engineers. At its heart, a small brass keyhole. Daniel's breath caught. He found it. He stepped forward and slid the key home. The lock turned with a resonant clang that rolled through the chamber like thunder. Gears ground. Dust rained down as the iron door shuddered and slowly opened. What lay beyond stole their words. Stacks of gold bars reflected their light in dull glimmers, but it wasn't the treasure that froze them, it was the walls. Rows of sealed metal crates, each stamped with military markings. Inside were folders, reports, film reels, ledgers, evidence preserved against time. Colonel Ashford's truth. Rico whistled softly. Holy hell, this isn't treasure. It's a confession. Daniel stepped closer, lifting a ledger. Inside were names, transactions, shipments, proof of theft and fraud buried beneath the war's glory. He felt a mixture of vindication and grief. His grandfather hadn't been chasing fantasies. He'd been guarding history itself. Then the world exploded. A blast tore through the far wall, throwing both men to the ground. Dust and firelight filled the chamber. Through the hole stepped Leland Vance, his tailored coat torn, face streaked with soot, but his smile intact. Behind him came two men with rifles. "Thank you, gentlemen," Vance called, voice smooth over the ringing in their ears. "You've done all the work for me." Shade's growl rumbled like thunder. Daniel rose slowly, positioning himself between Vance and the documents. Rico's hand drifted toward a rusted valve on the wall, the same one marked on the schematic as secondary control. Vance gestured casually. "Step aside, Mr. Hale. I'll take the gold, the files, and your silence. Or I'll take your lives. Either way, this story ends here." Daniel said nothing. His silence was its own defiance. Vance's smile faltered. He nodded once. His men raised their rifles. Everything happened at once. Shade launched herself, a streak of fury and claws, slamming into Vance's chest. He staggered backward, crashing into the crates. His pistol skittered across the floor. Rico lunged for the valve, spinning it hard. A grinding roar filled the bunker. The steel gate above the blasted entrance slammed down, cutting off Vance's men with a thunderous crash. Their shouts were swallowed by the echoing dark. Daniel dove for the fallen pistol, coming up with it in both hands. Shade pinned Vance to the floor, her teeth bared inches from his throat. The smirk was gone now, replaced by real fear. From somewhere deeper in the tunnels came the pounding of boots and shouted commands. A moment later, figures in tactical gear swept into the chamber from another corridor, rifles trained. Flashlights cut through the dust. One of the men stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. Leland Vance. Federal Bureau of Investigation. You're under arrest. Vance froze. The agent's gaze shifted to Daniel. Your grandfather worked with us, Mr. Hale. He hid this evidence until it was safe to bring it forward. You just finished what he began. Daniel lowered the gun, every muscle trembling with adrenaline. Shade eased back but stayed poised, still watching Vance with the eyes of judgment itself. The agent gave a small nod. We'll secure the site. You and your partner have done more than you know. 6 months later, the forest no longer felt haunted. The Ashford Hale bunker stood preserved under government protection, its corridors turned into an exhibit of integrity and sacrifice. Tourists walked the safer paths under glass lights. On the rebuilt porch of the old shack, Daniel sat with a mug of coffee, the morning sun threading gold through the mist. The debts were gone, cleared by the finder's reward, but he had used most of the money for something far greater, the Caroline Hale Foundation, a fund for veterans' families facing impossible medical bills. Rico waved from the trail below, now head of security for the site, laughing with a group of visiting students. Shade lay at Daniel's feet, her head resting on her paws, content. Her coat gleamed in the sunlight, and when he reached down to scratch behind her ears, she made that low, steady purr that had once echoed through the coldest nights. We did it, girl, he said softly. We brought it all home. She blinked slowly, the gold of her eyes catching the morning light. Daniel looked out over the valley. The fog drifted like breath from the earth, and for the first time since Caroline's passing, he felt peace, not the absence of pain, but its transformation into purpose. Some inheritances aren't measured in money or land. Some come as burdens, as mysteries, as callings we never asked for. Yet if we follow them, through grief, through fear, they can lead us back to who we were meant to be. And sometimes, in the darkest places of the world, the thing that saves us isn't gold or glory. It's the courage to keep walking forward.